This video was brought to you by NCIX. Great technology, selection, and service.
Hello everyone, this is Dmitry with Canucks, and the BitFenix Pandora project has a somewhat special bond with Canucks, as we were on a feedback committee from the very initial stages of the design process, which back then was the Phoenix project. So the goal was to create a mid-tower with compact yet capable internals, support for 120mm all-in-one cooler, long power supply, enough drive capacity, and a mini ITX form factor with that really cool looking exterior design. We returned some feedback with suggestions of making all drive slots hot swappable that would make total sense for this compact interior, suggesting for BitFenix to cover all the grounds with regards to dust proofing the enclosure and adequate airflow given the side panel curved around the main intake, plus also incorporate enough cable management room. Then Computex rolled around and the Pandora project went through a total internal redesign to allow for a micro ATX motherboard to fit inside without actually enlarging the case. So here we are, we finally have the finished product. This is the BitFenix Pandora ready for retail. And we're really excited to put this through its paces to see exactly what type of changes BitFenix has made and what type of feedback they have sort of gathered from the community. So BitFenix is releasing the Pandora in multiple versions ranging from $110 to $140 based on color, so black or silver, windowed side panel or solid, and the inclusion of BitFenix icon display in front of the case or not. I would say for a micro ATX form factor and this unique form, I would call it competitive on the edge. The aluminum exterior definitely adds to the premium looks. Now, this isn't exactly Lee aluminum quality, nor is it comparable to latest Fantex aluminum integration with the N2 Evolve, but it does hold its own with the aesthetics, as each panel wraps carefully around the front panel and spans the entire height of the case, hiding the low profile case feet at the bottom and the easily removable magnetic dust filter for your power supply. I wouldn't want to put this on the carpet per se, and you definitely want to be careful placing this on hardwood floors to avoid scratching the surface, as the aluminum edges aren't refined and this spans the entire perimeter of each panel. So BitFenix really should put more emphasis on smoothing out the edges, as I did get a few cuts during assembly. The panels are attached via this 4-bowl head mounts that are really difficult to install. You have to almost bang the panel for it to latch. It's not pleasant. However, taking off the panel isn't as difficult with just a pull from the front. On the one hand, it maintains that clean and uniform exterior, but this is by far the worst toolless panel design that we have seen yet. Taking them off reveals the glossy front intake panel that serves as an interesting contrast from the aluminum. It is well ventilated, plus it's curved to allow fans to acquire enough static pressure. As you can see, BitFenix has accommodated for this by having small gaps between each side panel and the intake vents. It is a compromise they were willing to make to achieve this beautiful design. Behind the panel is the BitFenix icon display. We'll touch on that a bit later. There's also the dual magnetic dust filter and a single 120mm fan included. Notice the fan sits on rails instead of fixed holes, with an option to install a second intake fan, so a 240mm radiator would fit just fine. Internally, the fan is practically touching the frame, so radiators only with the same width as the fan are compatible. And there's 65mm of clearance between the front and the internal bracket to fit the standard all-in-one coolers. But the bracket is also removable if you require that additional clearance. Now, the side panel design is not your standard square, as it does reveal that little portion at the bottom, which would be your SSD slot mount, which I think looks excellent, and the panel did not scratch easily, unlike with our recent experience with the S340 case from NZXT. A solid side panel option is also available for a lower price that looks just as clean, but you do lose out on that interior showcase. Coming around to the back, we see 5 PCI expansion slots. This is excellent to see for a micro ATX chassis, as the additional slot will guarantee compatibility with dual GPU configurations. The thumb screws holding the PCI brackets are not entirely easy to reach. That makes securing your graphics card more difficult than it should be, as the rear frame is on the way. Also, given the incredibly thin chassis design at only 16 cm, tall GPUs like the Asus 970 Strix would not fit, so keep that in mind. The top of the chassis is fully meshed, it's nice to see that, with dual USB 3 ports, audio jacks, and these large PR buttons that turned out to be quite wobbly, and it's small things like that that detract from an otherwise solid and sturdy construction. The filter sits on these push-to-release mounts where we find another 120mm fan and a really strange spot for a mechanical drive. Now on the one hand we do have rubber padding in the base to avoid vibrations, but you have to secure it from the inside. That would make swapping really difficult, plus deal with all these SATA cables exiting from the side facing the fan. I would have liked to see a second 120mm fan spot here for those not needing a mechanical drive and those who would like to take advantage of that extra exhaust power. And coming inside, one of the first things you notice is the lack of rubber grommets for the side cutouts. The only grommets included are in the bottom support bracket that help with routing your GPU cables, plus this is where you mount the SSD. Instead of having to screw in the drive, I would prefer a simple bracket any day to simplify assembly and swapping if necessary. There's another similar mount at the rear that's even less convenient, as that also requires mounting from the inside. In front of the power supply, there are a few mounting holes for 3.5 and 2.5 inch drives, and this would be the last spot for drives inside the Pandora. And the lack of a main drive cage means a potentially difficult wiring situation between all the installed storage. And knowing these limitations, you can plan your build accordingly, but still, props to BitFenix for squeezing in all these options despite being one of the thinnest cases on the market. And also a huge bonus is GPU compatibility with 35cm of clearance until we hit the front fan, meaning you can still add an all-in-one cooler without affecting GPU clearance. And starting with the assembly, I would recommend pre-routing your 8-pin CPU cutout, and here's the Pandora fully built. It was a heck of a process to get here with all the wiring and cleaning things up, but it sure was worth it. And you can see that rubber grommets on all the cutouts would have made the build even cleaner despite of us using all black cables and the stealthy hardware. The large opening at the bottom of the motherboard helps to route all the little cables, and here's my best attempt at hiding those SATA connections for the top 3.5 inch drive. Here's the side profile with all the gorgeous components and that side SSD that when with the window on looks excellent. Again, we come back to the compromise that arises with a thin design, as there is practically no space behind the motherboard tray for any cables. My best attempt to clean things up looks like this. Its thick power supply cables are not cooperative behind the motherboard tray. Luckily, you can tuck most of them in front of the power supply. Now when it comes to closing the panel, I was only partially successful, as the large gap at the rear is a constant reminder of how thin the case is, and the options for me would be to either route the 8-pin cable from the inside or have to deal with the panel popping off occasionally. And one of the last pieces before we conclude is the BitFenix icon. It is a front panel display that connects via a motherboard USB header. It's capable of showing JPEG images only that you drag and drop into the software on your desktop, so no GIF supported and no app support either, so don't think you can show time with the icon display nor incoming mail or anything like that. This is strictly for simple basic images only. It stays on for as long as the PC is plugged in, but does not require for the PC to be on, and viewing angles were okay, and this to me screams digital logo showcase that we haven't yet seen on a consumer release, and I think it's quite unique. Of course, how much you value this edition will depend on your personal taste and preference, so let us know how you feel with a comment below. And in conclusion, I think the case is beautiful, with the curved aluminum pieces and the BitFenix icon for that extra glare. The full dustproof design is appreciated, along with support for a 240mm all-in-one cooler at the front, and practically any GPU on the market will fit, plus the consideration for that 5th PCI bracket to allow dual GPU systems is a bonus. Now onto the bad. First, the incredibly difficult nature of side panel installation should definitely be addressed by BitFenix, as this was a huge turnoff. It was not a good first impression and still lingers in my mind after assembly. The aluminum edges should be refined to avoid cutting the users during assembly, and drive brackets for easier installation would make more sense for this tight interior. And lastly, the lack of any cable management room directly behind the motherboard means routing any thick 8-pin CPU cables at the rear may cause that panel to not even close. But regardless of all that, the BitFenix Pandora is without a doubt an extremely ambitious project, one that started as a mini ATX enclosure, scrapped completely based on feedback and turned into a micro ATX form factor without enlarging the frame, and that to us is innovative, especially given the compact and thin nature of the layout. But what do you guys think of the Pandora? BitFenix sure has shown us their involvement with community when it comes to design, and while it's not perfect, it is a case that's made to stand out. We just hope BitFenix takes all of our feedback into account for the next iteration, as there's definitely potential for such small form factor moving forward. And well, that concludes our review of the BitFenix Pandora. As always, thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe for more similar content, and we'll see you in the next one.